Let me introduce myself. My name is Grace Chng. I've been covering technology for the last 20 plus years with the Straits Times in Singapore. And with me here are ladies who come from policymaker, corporate executive, investor, and startup entrepreneur. So perhaps we could ask each of you ladies to introduce yourself, and then we can start. 2 minutes. Tracey. Dr. Dato.
Hi, I'm Yasmin. I'm the CEO of the Multimedia Development Corporation. I've been in the industry for 30 years, so I'm a veteran.
Hello, I'm Tracey Fellows. I'm the CEO of REA Group, which is in Australia, Europe, part ownership of a portal in the US, and now in Southeast Asia through iProperty, and we're on the Australian Stock Exchange at about 7 billion market cap, 30 years in the industry too.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronika Linardi. I am the co-founder and CEO of Qerja Group Asia. So we are a career portal, leading career portal in Indonesia. We got our humble beginnings because our company builder and investor, Qerja from Indonesia, invested in us. And then last year, SoftBank, Indosat, and 500 startups invested in us. Well, what can I say about my company? We have 2 portals, Qerja.com, which also means work in Malaysia and in Indonesia, except ours is with a Q because we emphasize on quality. A lot of working professionals come to our site, Qerja.com, because they want to research on salaries, company reviews, and content on how to maximize their career. And when they're ready to look for a job, they go to jobs.id. So essentially, we are a one-stop shop for career development, empowerment, and satisfaction. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is T. I'm a partner at Venturra Capital. We are a $150 million early stage fund focusing in Southeast Asia. So the firm is headquartered in Jakarta. I'm the partner that's based in Bangkok. But we really kind of just, openly invest in basically an entrepreneur from any country that is, has regional ambition to, really build a big business. So sector agnostic, Series A, Series B.
Well, thank you, ladies. Let's start the ball rolling. Dr. Yasmin, you were a computer science graduate in school. What about your cohort? Were there a lot of ladies then? What has happened to them? Are they still in the business or have they dropped out?
Okay. All right. So first of all, Grace, I must say that I've done a lot of women panel discussion, and this is the first time that I see more men in the audience than women. So I usually start by saying, go girls, but this time around I think, go guys. So, yeah, and they don't even get my joke. So, anyway, I did my studies in computer science and applied maths. And I went in there by chance because during that time, and it has been a long time ago, computer science was just a very new subject, and it was up and coming. So when I went to school, I was supposed to do physics because I'm a science nerd, and but the seniors there were saying let's do computer science, it's the up and coming thing. In my cohort, I did in Australia, so I don't know what happened to a lot of them now, but I do remember that there was definitely not that many women. And it was general in all STEM studies, in engineering. We were in the engineering school, and the girls were just enjoying the fact that there were not many women, and we were getting all the attention from the guys. But when I do recall coming into the industry, there were quite a number of women that comes into the entry level. But at that time, of course, as you move up, the tapering, the drop-off as you move up was so severe. And as I fast forward many, many years later, that tapering, that drop-off still exists. And that is where the concern is. The tapering off still exists. I was just looking at some numbers just now, and even companies in the tech sector, in our tech world, the highest percentage of women in leadership position is actually LinkedIn at 30%. Even Google and Facebook, even with Sheryl Sandberg there, is at 22% and 23%. And Tracey, our ex-company Microsoft, 17%. And we both know that there was a lot of focus that Microsoft put into trying to develop women leaders, and yet they're still at 17%. So that is really, so that the tapering off, the dropping off of Grace has not improved over the years.
So Tracey, you're as in a corporate executive, you see this tapering, and how would you encourage women to stay in the business?
Yeah, I mean, we do, definitely. And I think there's a question of awareness and what are the things you're doing to build a pipeline of attract women to your company, keep them in the company, so retain them, develop them, and really be looking at them for future leadership positions. We're in a fortunate position, so I've been in the role just under 2 years. So in that time, it has changed a little. My leadership team was 20% female. It's now 40% female. Our board was 20% female. It's now 40% female. And our senior managers are 40%. So we're 40, 40, 40. But there are definitely areas where we're not at that. Developers, our actual software developers, we really struggle to find developers full stop in Melbourne, and then to find females. And so our answer to that is to bring in graduates so that we build our own.
Right. I'll come back to you about increasing the leadership positions by 20%. Going on to you, Veronika, you run the startup business of empowering professionals, especially women. So when the women come to your website, what are they looking for? How are they comparing themselves to men?
Well, when it comes to women specifically, in Indonesia, we are raised to not actually we're not supposed to actually speak up, right? We were told to actually be a good girl and just keep our mouth and be beautiful. So when people come on board and start working, they're looking for many different aspirations and many different fulfillment. First and foremost is actually to support their family, right? But then after that, when they go up the career ladder, many of them are actually looking for fulfillment. And in that sense, a lot of them are looking for mentoring, networking, and training to actually improve themselves and to make it known that, to give it hope that everybody can do it as well as the other people. Yeah, thank you.
T, you're from the other side, you're looking at from the investor side. Do you want to encourage women to become entrepreneurs? Well, there are two questions actually for you. So how do you encourage the entrepreneurs to be women? And how do you encourage women to be investors?
Sorry, what is the second question?
The second, as investors, I don't see many women who are investors, who are venture capitalists. So how do you encourage that?
I mean, I think, we've actually seen, I think, a great progress in just a number of female founders just in the scene, right? So I think compared to 2 years ago when I used to go to conferences, I think the joke is always like, I love going to tech conferences because as a woman, I never have to stand in the bathroom line, right? Whereas anywhere when you go to a club, you go to a restaurant, always more women than men. But now I think that's really started to change, and I think it's just the function of having role models. So I think very similarly to any startups out there, when just thinking about, in a non-gender specific, when startup scene was just starting to grow and people didn't really see any role models, it was hard to encourage people to even consider, startup as a, viable career path. And now that we're seeing more role models, you're starting to see more people coming into the ecosystem. And I think that's very similar to women as well. I think as you see, more women becoming entrepreneurs, I think they are mentoring and becoming role models for other women to come in as well and saying, okay, this is a possibility and there's real value add for female, in this ecosystem as well. I think second, for us, we obviously don't particularly look for female founders, but, there's a lot of the businesses where we do ask a team, said, why don't you have a female on your team, especially if it's a, female-specific business. We looked at fashion businesses, for example, where we would ask, well, how do you go about, building this business? And the man who could be potentially building this would be like, well, I don't really understand how women shop, because for me, like, black shoes are black shoes, right? Which for women, black shoes are not like black shoes at all. So there are definitely like very, I think, quantitative, qualifiable value that a woman, approach and mindset could help build a business and be kind of a more effective and efficient business in general.
Tracey, how would you encourage women to be role models? Women usually, we like to be we like to sit down and, we don't push ourselves forward. Men would say that we belong to the 5-letter category, the word that starts with the letter B. So how do you push yourself forward without being too dominant?
I don't know that I'm a good one to answer that question, because I think, you know, my first CEO job at Microsoft, I said I couldn't do it. And if my boss hadn't, who was male, hadn't said, well, I could, then I wouldn't have. I don't know if it's about role modeling or about mentoring and feelings. You have a responsibility to help the next generation be as successful in all that they can be. And what is, well, it's stereotyping. What is often true of our gender is that we're not as comfortable putting ourselves forward for that next job. We're very tough critics, typically, and so we'll make sure we can do everything on that job description before we put our hand up for the next opportunity. That isn't so typical of our male colleagues, and so I think of it, rather than being a role model, because that probably, frankly, scares me a touch, is more of thinking I have a responsibility to mentor and help bring up the next generation of talent, because there's lots of talented men and women, but I want to make sure that we get all the best talent brought forward.
Veronika, how would you be a role model? How would you encourage women to be a role model and push themselves up front?
How to be a role model? Well, I see my mom as a role model. So I know that life is not always a bed of roses, but I also learned from my mom and my husband to always be optimistic. So going back to what I said about hope, just by going through all the obstacles and the bottlenecks of life, of running a startup and being who I am today, I guess I can be an inspiration to some people. Everyone in this room can be an inspiration to everyone. Just the fact that, you know, we made it here, you know, being invited as speakers at Wild Digital, being, you know, invested by top-notch global venture capitals, and having people come to our site to research more about what they want, what they like, and how they can be the best at what they do. I think we all help to provide an ecosystem so everyone can learn from each other and can be the best they can be. So in that sense, a role model is being who you are, knowing that there'll be good days, there'll be bad days, but just hang on tight to your dream, because there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Yes. Dato Yasmin, you're a policy maker. So are there policies that you can put in place, either informally or formally, to introduce women to become the next generation of leaders?
I'm part of the policy-making engine, but in my space, it is in the whole digital economy space. But for policy in terms of women empowerment, I think Malaysia is definitely in the forefront, because in the year 2010, we made a policy to, it wasn't a quota, but we put a 30% target for women on the board. And I remember, because I was really very much part of the group that was pushing for it. And I remember when the Prime Minister announced it, I was at the Parliament House, and we were very, very happy with the fact that there is this policy. But at that time, the percentage of women on the board was something like 8%, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's 15%. And so it has moved significantly, but not to the extent that it ought to move. So are there any other policy that needs to be done? I mean, this is a very strong policy, apart from quota, because even as women, we don't want it to be quota-based. It still has to be based on merit, but it is based on, at least there is that awareness that this has to be achieved, and there's a conversation as to when, why is this not being achieved? And this is currently happening. But the movement is still very slow. So I ask myself that question, and I ask policymakers too. I ask ambassadors. I asked leaders. I say, why is this? And the one thing that came up very strongly was the fact that if there are not enough women representation in politics, this is where policy making will not be as robust. So if you look at, in Malaysia, for instance, women in government is very strong. We have 40%, 37% of the top women civil servants in each the key ministries are women. So that's very high. Even in MDEC, for instance, we have 30% women in top management, and CEO, COO, CFO are all women. So it's really much a women power. They call us the Powerpuff Girls. But until and unless we have more percentage of women in the political decision making, who who are cabinet ministers. You know, and of course, in America now, we have got one big glass ceiling being broken, which is the first woman to be a political, the presidential nominee for a major party. So it is. So the answer to that, Grace, is that policy. There are many other policies that can be put in place, but the strongest policy Malaysia has put in place. But the execution and the subsequent follow-up really needs a lot more of political will and a lot of will from everybody else.
T, do you have anything to add? How do you think we can encourage women to train these women up?
Yeah, so definitely I think the first thing is policy and obviously providing a guideline. But second, I think is really about how do you build a culture so that when the women come, they also stay, right? For me, I have actually, my first job out of college was on the trading floor of a Wall Street, firm, the firm formerly called Lehman Brothers. And it was, it was a very, very male-dominated environment where, 80% men, a lot of swearing, a lot of yelling, a lot of male jokes. I actually used to cover oil and gas, so my clients actually were these Texan and Oklahoman men who only ate steak, pretty much. And, and then I moved back to Thailand, and I used to work for Central Group, which is a retail conglomerate, and completely different, women, 80%, Thai, so, and for me, I think, the right balance was kind of, where do you could feel comfortable? And I think part of, the reason why, I have been able to, build a strong network within venture capital is because of, my experience in previously knowing how to be in a male oriented environment beforehand. And I think, as, the ecosystem grow and there's more female in, it has become a lot more female friendly. I would say previously 2 years ago when I first started investing in the region, I would say 90% of, any investor attendees were men. And you just need to learn how to go with the flow and, take the jokes. And I mean, part of it is like, it was an environment I was, somewhat comfortable with. But I don't think that's true for every woman. So how do you really, create an environment that could really bring in, not just women who are comfortable in that environment, but the most talented and competent women, so that you really could just build the best team that you can build, and that's just really aligning the incentives of everyone on the team.
Right. Tracey, you said that since you came on board, your management team has you had doubled it from 20 to 40%. How did you do that? Was that the best person for the job, or was that?
Of course, yeah, it is, but absolutely the best person. And I really don't believe that you have to compromise on that when you're trying to get a mix of diversity on a team. But diversity comes in lots of ways. For sure, it's gender. It's also age. We have a very young workforce. It's different backgrounds. But you have to believe that you're going to get a better team and therefore better business outcomes if you have a diverse team. And I firmly, firmly believe that. So it's very easy to say, I want to get a good mix of people who have different skills, different thinking styles, different backgrounds, and guess what? They come in different genders.
You were both in Microsoft, and in Microsoft they had programs for women. So are these programs that can be applied elsewhere?
I think Microsoft had a couple of things. They did have a very intentional target around diversity within different countries, and then they had development programs that were geared to women, and I think they were very effective. The truth is, just a bit as Veronika said, people are inspired and motivated by different things. They need sometimes different development. So that part, I think, was useful, and I think the quota system had an element of being effective. It wasn't without resistance and a sense of men being somehow disadvantaged, so you got a kind of counterbalance that I think people can observe, and so you kind of create this unconscious bias. I think the one bit of training that we've done across our organization that's been really effective is unconscious bias training, because everyone has an unconscious bias. It's just depending on who you are, it shows up in a different way. And so I have it, men in my team have it, etc. And just that awareness across the whole organization was quite a wake-up call that we found.
If I can add to that, I think there are a few things that I found very useful when we were with Microsoft. Number one was that just raising the awareness. of the fact that diversity, and it's not only about gender diversity, it's about diversity beyond that. Of course, starting with gender. Just raising the awareness and putting KPIs around it. So therefore, like I mentioned, the conversations are happening. If, because otherwise people just tend to go for the status quo. So if there's more men, then there'll be a more status quo. It just requires a lot more effort to drive the diversity, to look out for the diversity without compromising on talent. And it's not an issue of, there's no lack of talent in women. So I think that's one, raising the awareness and having the conversations. Secondly was to really create an environment where flexibility. Women needs to have the flexibility to manage the demands as a mother, as a demands in the career. So that was the one thing that I thought Microsoft did was really good. The one thing which I thought they could have done better, and this is a conversation that's just beginning to happen, was the concept of mentorship and role modeling versus sponsorship. So there is enough role models, I think, by the virtue of a lot of us coming forward to just share our experiences. I don't think any of us comes out intentionally to be role models, but just being generous without the sharing of our struggles and our successes and our learnings. That is indirect role modeling. But what's really important is, and how I have been able to overcome a lot of the hurdles was really sponsors. I've had 2 or 3 sponsors in my career, people who believe, and these are men, who believed in my ability and who realized the challenges of me, challenges of me being not confident of myself, challenges of me trying to fight against stereotypes, challenges of managing life and work. And these are the people who understood it, and despite these challenges, were there for me and were championing my success.
Thank you. Veronika, how do you, in a country like Indonesia, where culture plays a major role, so how do you encourage women to mentor others?
Well, Indonesians in general are very warm, compassionate, and sincere people. That's why I also think that customer service is, very good in Indonesia. Of course, I'm biased, but I actually grew up in Singapore. I was exported out to Singapore when I was 6, and then I went to America for my tertiary education. So how do we as a community encourage others to, openly share? As mentioned, Indonesians are very generous with their time and compassion. So I don't think that, people are making special effort to not be kind and generous already. They are nice and generous to everyone already. So there are certain networking sessions for female, for entrepreneurs and all that. But I think it has to start from young. Right? For instance, for me, I grew up with 2 brothers and lots of male cousins, so I got toughened up in that way. And then going to school in America, I also graduated from Carnegie Mellon, and the gender ratio was to my favor. There's so many boys. And now working in a tech startup, that's also no exception. I mean, I'm the only female leader there, and the average age in the company is probably 24, not too far from Lazada and Zalora, where the co-CEO is 26. So in that sense, everybody is promoting well-being. And to share means to care. And obviously, I am far from perfect. I'm also constantly learning from my juniors. In a work setting, there's no such thing as I'm the boss and I get to say what I want. Everyone gets to say what they want. And it's through consensus that we agree what should be the right thing to do. So we play devil's advocate and all that. I guess that also promotes to a well-being of, being a mentor to everyone.
Right, okay. The last question, when I go around the panel, starting with T. Is there one tip you would like to leave this session with for women?
Put in a spot here. I think it just, as a woman, I think that's one thing that I keep telling myself too, is just really ask for what you want. I just think a lot of times we, there are things that we want. We want a promotion, we want a raise, we want to have more voice, in the decision-making process. But a lot of times I think we tend to stay quiet because we're self-critical, right? So there's a lot of, second, guessing that goes on. Like, is this important enough? Am I doing a good enough job? I would say 99% of the time, every single time I ask myself that, and looking back in hindsight, it was always good enough, right? It's probably always better than good enough. So just, be confident, step up. And I think, like the men around the room could also help with just, as you said, like sponsorship and, getting that woman, in your team or your colleagues to step up because she probably, deserves to be heard or play a bigger role in anything that you're working on.
Thank you. Veronika?
On a similar note, it'll be to dream big and don't limit yourself. You're as special as anyone out there, but what you have should be the perseverance and determination to make it happen, regardless of your gender and which family you were brought up in, and whatever it is, you have what it takes. It's all about you and your dreams.
I was going to say the one that T said, so rather than repeat, and maybe it's because I'm older and so I have a child, but I think one of the things I hear a lot is women with juggling family and work, and so my bit of advice for women would be don't torture yourself. Once you've decided that you want to have a career and be a mother, don't torture yourself if there's some things you can't do on the work front to be there early, or if there's things you can't do on the home front. You've made that decision. Don't torture yourself.
That's good.
I just want to add on to what T said. And this is an advice not only to women, but also to men. And I will say this in an example of a behavior. So this is a story of, if a job is being posted and it has 10 criteria, and a guy goes in there and says, oh, I've got 7 of that. Okay, I'm going to go for it. And a woman goes in there and says, oh, I only have 7. And that is something that women need to, because we are self-critical and perfectionists and too demanding of. So this is something that women have to address, but also for the men out there, if you are sponsoring or if you are looking for women talent, and getting diversity in the workforce is not because you want to be nice, it's because it's been proven that diversity is directly correlated to performance of a company, of a country. So also know this when you talk to a woman and says, oh, I don't think I can do the job. So encourage her to really not be as critical of herself as don't be so critical, and sponsor her to get her out of the shell. So that's it.
Thank you very much, ladies. I think, so sponsorship, role modeling, speak up, and go for it, and dream big, right? Thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening to us this afternoon.